Hey guys, Terry Red here, and in this video, this is going to be part one of a multiple series of videos that I'm going to be doing. That's going to be part of my all new, updated Future Pinball and BAM Essentials all-in-one package. So what I'm basically going to be doing is, this is going to be a brand new, complete package. Previously, this was something that you would have added onto your pre-existing install of Future Pinball or BAM. Well, now I decided to just go all out and basically make it a complete install package now. So that way, if you are someone who's brand new to Future Pinball and you've never installed it before, then you'll use this. Or if you have a pre-existing install, then you'll use this. It doesn't matter whether you've used Baller Installer or a standalone install or any setup of any sort. This will work for everyone. It's going to be one single zip file with the entire folder and the entire package of everything all in one folder, nicely organized. You don't have to do any installers or anything else like that. It's going to be very, very simple, but I've completely updated everything, organized everything, made it so much easier, and I've gone through all my guides and tutorials, which you may have seen on the various VPN related websites, and I've decided to finally convert all of those to PDF and completely update them as well and reorganize them so that way they're much easier to follow and they're no longer on the website. So that way you'll have them on your cabinets or your computers without having to be worried about an online connection. You'll have the information all at right in one folder basically. And I've also added a bunch of extra new tools and extra apps that are very handy for Future Pinball. And and just everything's been completely updated, and it's gonna be so much easier for you guys. So this is gonna be part one, and I'm just gonna kind of do a quick overview of it, and then I'll show how to do the install, whether it's a brand new install or an update. So yeah, that's basically what we're gonna be doing here, and it's gonna be so much easier for everyone, guys. So yeah, let's just get to it. Okay, so what will this package actually have? So before I show you how to install everything and set it up, I'm just going to do a quick overview of what it's more or less going to have. So it's going to have a simple text file. It's going to be a zip file that you can extract it anywhere you want on your hard drive, and it's going to have a zip file that's going to basically tell you what I'm going to do in this video. Basically, is what it's going to do. Uh, and then it's going to have a single folder here. That's going to be your Future Pinball folder. Everything's going to be in there. So if this is your first time installing Future Pinball, then you would just copy this folder and paste it wherever you want Future Pinball to go. If you've already got Future Pinball up and running on your system, or you just want to update it in any way, shape, or form, well then all you're going to do is you're just going to go into this folder, you're going to select all files, you're going to copy, and then you're going to paste all those files into your existing Future Pinball folder and then overwrite all files. And that's going to basically have all the files you need up to date. Because I'm going to maintain this and keep this up to date myself with the newer versions of BAM if any more versions come out. So what it's going to have is it's going to have the complete latest BAM installed. It's going to have the complete latest BAM-OpenVR installed. And it's going to have Future Pinball, BAM, and BAM-OpenVR automatically patched for 4 GB access. So you guys don't have to do any patching or anything else, because that's where people get so confused when they do an update and they don't pay attention to folder names that have extra spaces and all sorts of other things, and they get mixed up. Then they're like, oh, I forgot I have to patch the files for 4 GB RAM access because I replaced the files. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore, guys. You're just copying and pasting files now, and you're going to be ready to go. No more BS. It can't be any simpler. And I'm going to have some extra files and folders in here now. I'm going to have all my guides are all going to be in this single folder here now. So setup and guides. So now instead of my Future Pinball BAM Mega Guide or having guides or tutorials on various different websites, I've converted them all to PDF format and I've updated them with the newest info. So now there's no longer going to be a Future Pinball BAM Mega Guide. Now you're going to have a separate install guide, which is basically what we're doing in this video. Then you're going to have the info guide, which is basically the Future Pinball BAM Mega Guide, but just the main info for like Future Pinball's features, BAM's features, things like that. It's not going to have any extra duplicate info all over the place. And then I'm going to have a BAM-OpenVR guide that's going to relate mostly to the Oculus or MetaQuest 2 and 3 users, but regular whoever has other VR headsets, it's still going to apply to you. It's going to be the same relevant info and settings. And DMDX guide is going to be basic, like I had before, nothing too detailed. The Pin Event V2 guide is going to be updated, and all the extra info for like front ends and pup stream and stuff like that. All those extra guides are now going to be separate in their own guides, so that way it's not a huge amount of duplicate info. So now you're going to have a new baller installer tips and a pinup popper guide. So if you use pinup popper or baller installer, all the new relevant info is all going to be in one guide there. That's going to be super handy to help you, get everything customized the way you want. For launching games with certain settings or whatever else you want to do. It's all going to be on there to make it super easy. That way, it can be the way you guys want, right? And I'm going to have 2 more new guides for single screen users. So I'm going to have the previous one I had. So for running Future Pinball in full screen, but then you had to use a dummy monitor and run it in pup stream. That's still the same as it was before, but now I have a new windowed version. So if you want to run Future Pinball in windowed, then I have other workaround methods to make that work, and that's in this guide here. And then now I have a brand new singular FAQ and help guide. That's not part of install instructions, or that's not part of any other guides. I'm not going to have a FAQ, with a ton of info anywhere else. It's all going to be, centralized in this one singular guide. So that way you just have to go here for most, answers to the most common questions in one location. It's not going to be here, there, all over the place anymore. So that's why I wanted to do all that. That way it's all offline. You don't have to go to any websites. It can be in your Future Pinball folder anytime you need it. So that way I only update this one package. I don't have to update a bunch of different sites or different sources anymore. Way easier for me to just do this. Now I also have a folder of tools and other apps. So for example, the 4 gig patcher app, if you need it for any reason, it's still there, just in case. Future Pinball Companion is basically a program to extract contents from a Future Pinball table. So it'll extract all the files, basically. So then you'll get all the sounds, music, models, everything all separated now and easier to get instead of manually doing them one at a time. If you want to run Future Pinball in a borderless windowed mode because it doesn't have that option, well then this is a workaround to make that work. The Future Pinball model editor, so that's basically just for converting milk-shaped models to Future Pinball models. Can be handy if you want to do table edits or things like that, or create new tables. Reset monitor IDs, so if your display numbers or display IDs get confused, which does happen in Windows, and it messes up Future Pinball, it messes up Visual Pinball, sometimes it'll basically erase the settings in the registry for all your monitors, and then when you reboot, it's like starting from fresh for all of them. And that sometimes when things get confused or mixed up, that can help with that. So that's what that's basically is, to try to see if that can help. And then XR Runtime Picker, that's basically for VR only. If you want to change what the OpenXR default is, not normally needed, but it's there in case you wanted to use it for VR purposes. And then in this folder, this is the all-in-one example table and tutorial. So if you want to update a Future Pinball table to have PhysX physics, Fleet mechanical sounds, Pup SSF, DOF, and ball rolling, that's all in there. And I did a video on that as well, but it's all, the newest version will be in there as well. And then the last thing is, and of course not the last thing, but then you have DMDX or DMD extensions. The files you need for that are in here and, of course, here. So that way, it's in the Future Pinball folder, ready to go, no problems at all. So the last thing is all these guys down here. So what are these? These are batch files. So a batch file is basically just a text file that when you double-click on it, it'll just run whatever commands are in that text file. And, like Pen and Popper uses batch files when it launches your tables, for example, right? So what I've done here is when using Future Pinball, you kind of have to change settings if you want to do different types of things. For example, if you want to run in VR, well, you may want to change some settings specifically for VR that are going to be different than, say, if you wanted to run it in a multi-screen cabinet view, or if you wanted to run it in a single-screen desktop view, or if you wanted to run a pin event table that has a pup pack that you don't want the Future Pinball back box enabled because the pup pack is going to be displayed there instead, So you don't want to have to go back and forth and change those settings, and that's one of those areas where people would get so super confused if they're not using, say, Pen and Popper, and they try running Future Pinball on its own, and then things go all wacky and they don't know what they've done. Well, then what I've done here is I've just made it so that these individual batch files will make those changes for you automatically before running Future Pinball. So you're like, hey, I want to play games in VR. You just double click this, and then it'll run Future Pinball with the settings preset for you, and all the settings. It'll disable what it needs to disable, but enable what needs to be enabled as well. Same thing for running a pup pack, or if you want to run DMDX as well, you have options for that as well. So that's what all these are for, and I'll go over that a little more later on. But it's super handy, makes life so much easier for you guys, especially if you don't use a front end. So yeah, and that's basically the overall contents of what you're going to have in here. It may change since this video was made, but you get the idea of more or less what I'm going for here to make things just complete and easy for everyone with all the absolute essentials for what you need with Future Pinball and BAM for every setup out there, whether it's VR cabinet or a single screen. It's all in here, ready to go. Okay, guys, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the included Future Pinball install guide that comes with this package to kind of step you through it. I mean, you kind of have to get the package already to get the guide, but it is what it is. We'll just go with it. So basically, it would be in this folder here, and in this here, and there you go. It's right there, and I already have it open. So it's going to be this guy here, all right? So this is just for getting you up and going. Nothing too detailed for features or settings or anything like that. So we'll just go through in order. This is going to be, we'll cover a new install and updating a previous install, okay? So basically it tells you what the Future Pinball BAM Essentials package is. This is what we're going to be using from now on. And then how to set up a Future Pinball BAM the easy way, or how to update it. Doesn't matter if it's for VR or anything, it's all going to be the same. So these are our main steps right here. So this is what we're going to do. So let's go to step one. All right, so Windows settings. So this is the stuff we need to do in Windows before we get things going. So Windows settings for Defender, that's a pain in the butt. That's the big evil we have to deal with. Basically, Windows Defender needs an exception added for Future Pinball, when we've installed it. Because the idea is it may block functions or it may restrict functions because it's an older program. It uses VBS, so Visual Basic Scripting, and, so it's a pain in the butt. So my recommendation is to temporarily disable Windows Defender when you're doing the initial install and setup, and then add an exception to Windows Defender for the entire Future Pinball folder, once you've got it installed, and then that way it won't cause any problems. Now the problem there is I can't show you that because, well, hold on a second, because mine's completely disabled on this particular PC that I'm showing you on, so I can't really show you that, but I'm sure you guys can figure out how to temporarily disable, because understand, when you disable Windows Defender, it's only temporary and it will come back. So that's why you need to add the exceptions. Unless you're someone like me who understands how to completely disable it outright, and I have other bits of security and antivirus that I prefer to use. So I leave that up to you. Just make sure you add the exceptions after Future Pinball has been installed. Very, very important. All right, so text scaling. So this is yeah, this is basically part of some of the issues we have when running, say, on a 4K display, for example. It may, if you have your display setups, hold on a second here. Actually, I'll just do it the easier way. I'll just go like this. So if you go into display settings, for example, and you have a multi-screen setup, so this is mine, for example. I'm only running in high def right now for this video, but if this was running in 4K, by default, they usually have the text scaling set to like 200%, for example. Well, the problem with that is that will cause Future Pinball, Pup Packs, and DMDX to like blow up to a larger size, you know, and it screws everything up. So the recommendation is to have all your screens set to 100. Now, I know that's kind of a pain with a 4K display, but it is what it is, and it's just what we have to deal with. You can, however, make the Future Pinball EXE main programs disable DPI scaling. We'll come to that, but it still won't fix the other problems, but it will at least make Future Pinball look correct no matter what. So that's one thing to keep aware of. So basically, our Windows display settings is what this is talking about. So our screen's layout, bottom line is, you need to have your displays arranged in this order. The play field first, then the backglass, then your topper DMD after that. So this has to be your main display, and then all displays have to be aligned at the top. Because if you want to have the Future Pinball backbox window display used for like regular Future Pinball tables, then it has to be to the right or it won't work. It'll just cause lots of problems, okay? So make sure, don't worry about these numbers. The numbers are irrelevant, okay? It's whatever Windows just happens to assign them. So it doesn't have to match what this is. Just make sure it's playfield, backglass, and then the other screens that you have in your multi-screen setup. All right. All right, so backup files or in checking the BAM version. Okay, so this is if you have a previous install of Future Pinball and BAM already. So in this case then, let's see here. So I do have one here from a previous baller installer setup. So if I go to my vPinball folder, and there's my Future Pinball install there. So what we want to do is first, we can check to see what version of BAM we have installed. So you go to the BAM folder, and you right click on BAM DLL, and then you go to details, and then we see currently this is the newest version. So we are at least up to date with BAM in regards to what's in this folder. Doesn't mean all the files are updated, but at least, you know, our BAM currently is up to date. And same thing with BAM-OpenVR, because, you know, they're completely separate folders with separate files. Same idea. Okay. Now this is a beta version, so that's why that's a little newer. Ignore that because that's just for me trying some testing. But so that's what that's for there. And all right. So basically, what we want to do now, because we're going to be updating this particular folder, is we want to back up the BAM folder, BAM-OpenVR, and our pin event folder or our scripts folder. So basically, I already made a backup folder in here. So, you know, name it whatever you want. So what I do is I just select these three and I copy and then I put them in here. Now I already have a bunch of files. I'm just replacing what I already had in there for a backup. So you can see they're all in there. So that way, if you need your settings from pin event, they're there. If you changed those previously, maybe you have some config files. And BAM, you don't want to lose just in case, you know. So it's a good idea to do that on a regular basis. I mean, you can back up the whole folder if you want, you know. However you want to do your backup, it's up to you. So now that we're backed up, now we can proceed with our install. So the Future Pinball BAM Essentials package. I've already downloaded this. I'll have a link. This link may change in the future, so don't assume that's good. So I already have mine installed, or I mean downloaded, I mean. So what we have to do after we've downloaded is we have to be absolutely sure this file is not blocked by Windows. Everyone has to check this. I don't care what settings you have in Windows, because Windows updates sometimes changes things. So make sure you take this step. So what we have to do is we have to right click on this file, go to Properties, and look down here to see if it indicates that the file has been blocked by Windows. If it has been, it'll look something like this. You'll have something like this down in the bottom, and you'll see this appear. So to unblock it, you click on this, and then you hit apply and OK, and then that will then make it look like this, and then you can hit OK, and then that's unblocks the file. If you don't do this, if you go and extract this file, well, then a bunch of files inside could also be blocked. You're going to have nothing but headaches. So make sure everyone takes this extra step. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract this file to a folder. I just always do it as the same name as the zip file. It makes it easy to keep track of. And then if you go in there, and you can see our files are in there. This is our complete Future Pinball install file, and then just the text file that's basically telling us the same thing as to what we're doing right now. All right, so I've already disabled Windows Defender, and I'm using the latest 7-zip, which I highly recommend to extract the file. And for the new install file, you just move this folder to wherever you want it installed, or copy it if you prefer. So in that case, let's say on my C drive, my games folder. Yeah, perfect. So I could just copy it in there. And I could have that be my location if I want. Now, in the case of an update, so if we want to update an existing install, we want to copy the contents to our existing one and overwrite the files. Okay, so basically now, what we want to do is we want to go here, and we want to go inside the Future Pinball folder, and then we want to select all files. And then we want to copy. And then we want to go to our current install. Now I have mine here in the Baller Installer folder I had before. And then I want to basically paste and replace all the files in here, because we already did a backup of the important files that will get replaced. Okay? All right, so I paste and then replace all files. And there we go. Now we're completely updated just like that, with all the new files, the new guides, the new tools, literally everything. BAM's updated, BAM-OpenVR is updated, and then Future Pinball, BAM, and BAM-OpenVR are patched for 4 GB access. All right, there you go. So then now that we've done all this, again, add this folder to your Windows Defender or antivirus exception list to make sure they're not removed in the future. Okay? All right, so now that we have our folder installed, we have to now take the moment to install our prerequisites. So this is required because Windows 10 doesn't always include, or 11 even, doesn't include necessarily DirectX or Visual C runtime updates, which are needed for Future Pinball and BAM, Visual Pinball, and other programs like emulators or just all sorts of programs require it. It's just mostly the older ones that need it, right? So what we're going to do is to do that, we go into our setup and guides, we go to our install guide folder, and then we have the Visual C runtime and DirectX folder here. Okay, so we go in there. So let's install DirectX 9. We'll just run that like that. We'll agree, and then we'll just hit next. Now, if you get a request for a bank bar, which you should not, but if you do, say no, disable that checkbox if it comes up, but it shouldn't in this one. And then now we're going to go to the Visual C runtimes and install all those. Now to install these, you basically have to right click on install all BAT and then run as administrator. And then when the prompt comes up, you say yes. Now it's gonna. Now I already did this, so it's going to go much quicker than normal. It's going to go through and install each of the packages, although it's taking a little longer because my external hard drive is powering on, so it's taking a moment. Oh my, that's a slow hard drive. Yeah, it's a external backup hard drive that's just powering on all of a sudden because I'm doing this. So there it goes. All right. So see, now you can see it's going very quick because I've already installed all these. It'll take a lot longer for you on when you do this the first time. Highly recommend everyone does this regardless. That way you know for sure you're set. Okay. So when this is all done, then you can reboot. Like reboot your computer just to make sure it's all good. Okay. All right, so now that's done. Okay, so now we're at the point where we can now start installing our settings files. So the idea of what we are doing here is BAM has a lot of settings. They can be pretty overwhelming if you don't know what they are or how they work. So what I've done is I've already done the work for you guys. I've done preset settings for desktop or for cabinet or for VR. You just need to copy them into the BAM folder for whatever you're using. So super simple to do. You just go into the BAM settings folder, and there they are, each of them there. So for in the case, and it even tells you right here. So for example, for VR settings, and I recommend everyone do this. That way you're all on the same page. Now the reason why these are not necessarily pre-installed is because I don't want to overwrite your current settings files in case you did your own custom files or whatever. But if you are not sure or you've not done anything specialized at all, then I would recommend installing these anyway. That way you know for sure you got the right settings. So for VR, you select these three files because these are the three files that BAM uses for its main settings. Okay, and then you just basically go to the BAM-OpenVR folder and then you'll paste them in there. Now, I already have three in there, but I'm just going to reinstall them anyway because I know these are a good default setup to start with. And then I'm just going to go back. And then now you have to choose whether you're going to use a cabinet or a desktop setup for the normal BAM, not the VR version. Now, in this case, I'm running on desktop, not cabinet, because that's what I'm doing for this video. So just make sure you're choosing the right ones. Now again, if you screw something up in the future or you think you've done the wrong ones, you can come back and reinstall these at any time. It doesn't matter. No matter what, at any time you can just reinstall these. So for cabinet or desktop, they go into the BAM folder and then you just paste them in there. Now I already had some in there, but I'm replacing those anyway. So that way I know they're good. So then, so now that's it. Yep. So as I said before, if at any point you feel like you need to reinstall them because you think you screwed something up, but do it at any time. It's not a problem. So this page is just basically summarizing what changes those files made to certain settings. So you don't have to know these. I'm just letting you know what I changed with those files. Okay. So now step 6, we're at Future Pinball settings. So now we are basically going to be updating our editor settings and the video settings for Future Pinball. So we're just going to do that. We're basically, what we're doing is we're changing the settings in the registry is what we're doing right now. So just so you can see, so this is where our settings are in the registry. The registry is where Windows keeps most of your main Windows settings for lots of programs. So this location here is where Future Pinball's main settings are located, is right here. So, sorry, just give me a second. So, basically, instead of having you guys do it the hard way, I've already done it, a bunch of files to allow you to do it the quick and easy way. So, all you got to do is go into this Setup and Guides folder, install guide, Future Pinball settings, and then if you're not sure about what all these files are, you can just read this README file. It explains everything in here about what they are, which ones you use, if you match the resolution for both screens or whatever your setup is. Just it tells you which file to use. Okay. So if you're not sure, then it's simple. If you want to set up for VR, then just set up the Future Pinball VR settings. Just double click on that file. If you want to set up for desktop normal usage, then just do the desktop. And if you want to do it for cabinet, just do the cabinet. That way you could still change your resolution after the fact anyway. So in this case, we're doing desktop settings. So I'm just going to run that. When it asks you, do you want to make the change, you say yes. So I do want to make the changes in the registry because I know it's okay. So I hit yes. And then it's saying the changes have been made. And there you go. So what that has basically done is, if you load this picture up, this shows all the settings that we're basically changing. So in this case, because we're running a single screen desktop, it made these changes and it made all these changes, which are required. We have to have these settings for it to work correctly. The ones circled in green are the only ones we can make a change. The other ones have to match exactly what I'm showing you here. That's required for all Future Pinball tables to work correctly. It's not an option. So even like this right here has to be 7, okay? So it matters. So that's what we've done. We've made these changes automatically, okay? Now, if you have, for example, actually, we also have Xbox gamepad settings in here as well. So if you got an Xbox controller that you're going to use with this thing, we can make these changes all in one shot automatically without having to do it the hard way. So same thing, you just click on this, run it, and then it'll add those settings. Only if you have that kind of controller and you're going to use it as a gamepad, I would use that, okay? All right. So again, remember where this is located, this video settings page, because you can always come back here and see it nice and easy to make the changes manually if you need to. All right. All right. So that's been done. Okay. So now we're at the point where we're going to run Future Pinball for the first time. So we have to do this a specific way because of the way Windows is. It's kind of finicky. It's kind of a pain in the butt. So how do we run Future Pinball? Well, you have to run the correct program for it to launch. Now, you would think, oh, well, that's this guy right here, right? No, you do not run that. That's the old editor core app, which hasn't been changed in like 13 years. So BAM is the update to Future Pinball. So what we're doing is we're running BAM to then have BAM run Future Pinball. All right. So to do that, you have to run FP Loader, this guy here. If it's just normal 2D flat pancake mode, then you're running it from the BAM folder. If you're doing it for VR, then you're running it from the BAM-OpenVR folder. Okay. So basically, the first time we have to run Future Pinball, we have to run it as administrator, just that first time. So that way we can get the right permissions and everything running correctly in Windows. So all you do there is you find FP Loader here, and you run as administrator. You hit yes when it asks you, and then now it's running Future Pinball, and that's it. That's as long as you do that first time, you should be fine. Once we go to check our settings, it should be good to go. All right. So now, if you read more about this, it's just telling you how you properly need to run Future Pinball, what not to set as administrator, what not to do. That's what this is basically telling you here. And we'll get into more details. Again, I'm not getting into super details on this one. We're just getting you up and running in this video. Okay. Now, I'll come back to these. These are the BAT files I mentioned before. We'll come back to those so that you can understand how they can be used. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to check our settings. So editor settings, we'll just go right here. And you can see they matched a picture, so you're good to go. So now we're going to go to our video and rendering settings. So this is the one we made the changes to with the reg file, okay? So basically the settings are mostly the same whether it's desktop, cabinet, or VR. There's only some settings that you would change, all right? So certain settings, as I mentioned before, have to be the same, the exact same as this picture. But the ones in green are the ones you can change, okay? So Uh, Now, in the case of vertical sync, I do go into more detail about that. You normally keep that on unless you're running in VR in a situation where your monitor can't run at the same hertz as your VR headset is going to be running in. But that's a separate video. So the info's all here. Just make sure everything matches. Now, we're doing a desktop setting, so everything's good here. All you got to do is make sure that your display is going to match what your screen is here. So see, I'm running HD right now, so that's correct. Now, you notice this shows display 1 and display 2, right? Remember what I mentioned before about the numbers not being important in Windows? So this is my display 1, and this is my display 2. So don't let that throw you off. I know it's confusing, but the bottom line is usually Future Pinball will use whichever is the first one as the play field to match the first one here, and then the second one to match here will match here. Okay, so that's, if you have to, you choose whichever one will work. Okay, don't try to match the numbers, just choose the ones that work. That's all I can say about that. If you go by that, then you'll be fine. But if you try to match the numbers, you might get into some confusing headaches. Yeah, it's annoying. Now, if you're going to do a multi-screen cabinet setup, the only difference is these three settings here. All right, like the use second monitor for a back box, so that's this one here. Choosing the back box, which would then change this, and then also arcade mode. So the idea is if you want to have that second screen for back box enabled, you have to have this guy and this guy enabled. If you don't want that second screen for the back box enabled, and there's for VR or pup packs you don't want that, then they both have to be disabled. You can't have only one or the other, or you'll have weird stuff, things go wrong, problems. So just remember that. So if I was using this with a cabinet, I would enable both of these. I'd go to the back box, different display. I would make sure that disk resolution matches my back box screen's resolution. And that's it. Like, you know, a lot of people miss this step, and who have cabinets and multi-screen setups. Make sure you guys take the extra step to check this, because most people have this set wrong. So it's extremely important you guys do this. Even if you don't think you're going to be using it, set it right the first time and then test it. And then once you know it's okay, then you're fine after that. Now, now the other thing is, let's see here. Now, if you're running in a cabinet setup, you may also need to change this to 270 if you have this screen in landscape mode, okay? So that way it'll all line up and rotate correctly and match correctly. So for me, I'm not using that. So I'm disabling both of those. Okay, so we're just using normal desktop. So that's what basically this is trying to tell you. All this stuff is talking about the pains that I just mentioned and the problems you can run into. Now, sometimes if your display numbers get really mixed up and they keep coming on the wrong screen, sometimes what you have to do is you have to erase your monitor settings in Windows. To do that, basically what you do is you go into this folder here, Tools and Other Apps, Reset Monitor IDs, and the idea is you would run this file. It would erase three settings. Here, actually, I'll show you right here. It would erase these three settings in your registry. And then the idea is you reboot Windows and you redo your settings in Future Pinball, and hopefully they all work again. And you know, it helps some people. It doesn't always work, but it's an option if you have a problem with your display IDs getting so mixed up they just won't work no matter what. All right, so that's what all this is talking about. So this is what I mentioned earlier about how the arcade mode and the second back box both have to be on or both have to be off. Okay. Now, if you're running a cabinet type setup and you want to have the cabinet view with this back box disabled, that's fine, but you have to then force the arcade mode in BAM settings, and well, that's something for another portion that's beyond what we need to do in this video. But the bottom line is, this tells you how to enable that to make that work. And now, if you used my BAM settings files, the ones that we installed, back here, if you installed the ones for cabinet, then that does this for you automatically. So you don't have to worry about going in and setting that yourself manually. And if you don't have the right view, then you can just reinstall these files and you're good to go. Okay, that's what basically all this is talking about. And that's what all this is talking about as well. So if you're a desktop single screen VR user, you must never have arcade mode, this guy here, enabled ever. If you're running Pin Event pup packs, you do not have your second screen back box or this enabled. Okay, so that's what all this is talking about. Now you have the option of running Future Pinball in windowed. Normally you would never ever do that. The only time you would ever do that is either for troubleshooting, or if you're a single screen user and you want to be able to display a pup pack on the same screen in windowed mode. That's the only time you would ever do that. Normally, you would run Future Pinball in full screen and with VSync on in most cases. Okay, so that just so you understand. But there are workarounds, and that's what this page is telling you about. I'm not going to go through that on this video, but if you can read up on that, and then it explains some of the workarounds you can use that I've included in here, which was in this folder right here, and you can read more about that in there. Okay. All right. So basically, we're at the point where we've got our video settings all good. Now we can start with any possible control settings. So the control settings, if you're using a keyboard, you're probably not going to change anything. If you're using a game controller, you may have to change some things depending on your cabinet setup or whatever you're using. So basically, you would go to Game Keys and Controls. Now, Future Pinball supports multiple controllers with separate settings per controller. So, for example, I don't have my gamepad turned on. Hold on a second. I don't know if it'll show up now, but okay. So here, hold on a second. All right, so here, let's just do that again. All right, let's get back here. It should show up now. There it is. All right. So I'm not making any changes, so that's fine. I don't enable the mouse because it's not really useful unless you're using the ball roller, and even then it doesn't work very good. So this is what we added earlier to the registry. Remember that file we added? So that's what this is already preset for our gamepad. All right. So if you have a cabinet controller with, a gamepad type controller with buttons and analog access, you set all that up here. All right. The keys are all set up here. Now, if you're using a controller for digital nudge, I think a gamepad controller, unfortunately, you can't change the settings for that. That's hard coded to the D-pad, and that there's no way to change that. However, if you're using keys, you can make that work. So if you try to make that work with a mixing and matching however you want. But yeah, that's the one thing you absolutely cannot change on a gamepad controller is the D-pad, which is hard-coded for nudge, and you don't have button options to change that, so there's nothing you can do about that. There are no tilt bob dedicated keys, so you can't set that in here. However, pin event tables do have a tilt bob feature, but that's in another video. So we'll cover that in the pin event video. For plungers, you can do it with an analog axis, and you can also use an analog axis for nudge. That being said, you only have the normal X, Y, and Z axis that you can use. You can't use any other additional like rotation or inversion or any other possible axis, analog axis controls that you could configure. So you set those here. You can change your gain. They may or may not work very well. Uh, Now, I will tell you that there is a bug in Future Pinball that if your system language in Windows is not set to English, then you may not get any access options showing up. It's a bug in Future Pinball. We can't get around it. It's well known. It's been like that forever, unfortunately. No way around it. So that's it for the main controls. So special 1 and special 2 buttons. So those are basically your magna saves. So if you have, say, a pinball cabinet with a second set of buttons by your flippers, then that's what the special 1 and special 2 buttons are used for. Some tables use them, not not many, but some do. Now, if you have stage flippers, or like a button with two sets of controls, like you push the button halfway in, it does one control, and then you push it all the way and it does a second control. Some real pinball machines actually do have that. So the idea is that your bottom flippers are activated halfway, and then when you push the button in all the way, then your top flippers are activated. It allows more control for, like multi-ball and certain situations. So if you have that kind of setup, Future Pinball does support it only if the table supports it. Now, pin event tables do support it on a lot of the tables, but you have to go in here and manually configure your controls. Now, you could do it for the gamepad buttons, but if you're using keys, then you have to make sure you go in and change them, because if you look, second left flipper and special A or special 1 are both A. Right second flipper and special 2 are both apostrophe. And what's going to happen is, if you don't change your second left flippers to something else, well, then you're going to have both your special, your magna saves, and your second stage flippers doing the same thing, and it's going to cause a lot of confusion in those tables. So make sure you go in and change those settings in here. Okay, don't forget that if you have that kind of setup. Fire action button, no such thing as a dedicated button. So usually the tables will have that, if they do support it, mapped to your special 2 or special 1 magna save buttons, basically. Most of my pin event releases, I have this supported with either the magna saves or the plunger button as well. That can also activate these in the same way. But yeah, they're all going to be different, so it depends on the table. The sound and music, so basically those are done with the home and page up, page down, but you can set them with the gamepad controllers buttons. Basically, these are per table settings, though. They're not a global setting. So you have to wait till you play the table, and then you change the settings while you're playing the table. Keep in mind, Future Pinball sound and music is very loud compared to, say, PUP SSF. So if it sounds like you don't have surround sound feedback, well, it's possible you do. It's just your Future Pinball sound is really loud in comparison, and you're just not. You have to balance it and reduce the levels down so that they all match up and are more noticeable. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, so our controls are all set up. So now it's just a matter of, well, we got to get tables. So where do we get tables? So basically, I've got links to all the main sites where you can find various tables. Now, my personal releases are pin event tables. So if you see a pin event table, that basically means it's a Terry Red table, my own tables, or a mod I've done, or an update. The bottom line is, it just means that they all will have the same standard that I created for my own releases. So they'll all have the same kind of features, whether it be DOF, SSF, PUP DMD, or PhysX physics, newer lighting, newer shadows. Basically completely updated and modernized. So they're all going to have the same consistent standard across the board. The PUP packs will have the same options. That's what Pin Event is, basically. So if you see a Pin Event Lite, it'll be similar, just with some options that aren't fully updated yet. And you can find them on all the main sites. And then these are all the other sites that you can get more additional tables at. So we have all these on here. And, oh, actually, I got to update. I forgot to add IR Pinball on there for the EM tables. All right, so once you download a table, what do you do with it? So everyone packages tables a little differently, so they may not be nicely organized. I organize mine all exactly the same, but I put this here so that way you guys will know what the heck to do with all the files. So if you get a table, here, let me just move this over. So if you get a table, I'll use Sonic Pinball Mania as an example. So this is how mine are usually organized. You'll get a zip file, like this, and you'll extract it, and then they'll have folders like this, but not everyone does that, okay? So the table file will be in a .fpt. So basically, you copy that to the tables folder within Future Pinball. Don't put it in a subfolder or a folder somewhere else. Always put it in the tables folder. Some tables won't run correctly if you put them elsewhere because of the way the script works, the way it looks for files and other things. So always make sure they're in here. Now, it looks like I already have it in there, but I'm going to do it in there anyway. All right, so you can see there's other ones in here. So if there's a library file, that's what they were talking about here, library files.fpl. Some tables do have them. Those would go into your libraries folder. So you could see some of them already here. Okay. All right. So now, if it's a pin event table with a pup pack, then you would copy the pup pack to your pup videos folder. That's for the pin event guide and video. So that's beyond the scope of this video. Now, the other important one are the config files. So config files, as it mentions here, are for your POV. So that's basically if someone provides it, which I'm probably one of the few that actually does. I provide a config file for cabinet and a cabinet with no apron, so depending on how you like the sizing done, and for desktop. So in this case, we have a desktop setup, a single screen desktop setup. So what I do is I copy that file and it goes into your BAM config folder or BAM-OpenVR config folder if you're running in VR. So I go to config and then I paste it here. Now, this has to be named the same name as your table file. So if you were to, say, go back and change the name of this to something different, or say you changed it in Pinup Popper, for example, to a different name, well, then you're going to have to go back and change this to match it, okay? Because what will happen is if BAM doesn't see a matching file name, it will create a new config file, and that may not look correct for the POV or the camera or whatever else, So that's why it's important to make sure you use the right file name that matches. Okay, so that's been installed. Script files, so VBS, some tables might come with one. Most don't. Like some of them will come with this file here for ball rolling. Physics files, like XML or zip files, those are only for old tables like Z, physics, or some really, really old tables. But if it's a physics table, it doesn't use any of that stuff. It's all completely in the table script now. So physics doesn't use any external files for physics. Sometimes you'll get ball textures in a zip file, and typically those are in the BAM folder under balls, and you see there's already some here. So while you're playing on most but not all tables, you can cycle through the ball texture while you're playing to have different balls, and it remembers it as well. So some people like that, and you can download extra ones to install as well. And I think that's basically, yep. Okay, so that covers basically installing all the files. All right, so now we're at the big point here. So again, how do we play a Future Pinball table? Like how do we operate it? How does it work? So basically, we always, as I said before, always use BAM to load and edit a table or anything. You always use FP Loader to load a table. All right. So we've already got this loaded up. So if you want to open a table, well, what I do is I do the new table for a first test, just because it's simple and quick. So if you choose new, it will bring up the empty new table, right? So then to play the table, you either click on this or you go here and click play table. All right, so I'm going to do that right now. And we'll see if it all comes up and works. So there you go. We know it's working. It's all looking correct. So now, very simple things you can change. You can hit the function keys to do a few different views, the built-in Future Pinball views. You can push the C key for the BAM camera views. Those are separate. So you'll see there's 3 global settings. And I preset these so that they look nice. That's part of the BAM settings files we copied over. And then you have 3 table settings that are separate from the global settings. All right. And if you set the BAM ones with C and you exit the table, it will remember which one of these you last used. So when you load up the table the next time, this is what you'll get. Unless the table has a built-in camera view in the table script, which my pin event tables do have that option. So keep that in mind. If things are, you make these changes and all of a sudden you load up the table and then it goes back to the first view it had, read up on the install instructions with the table, okay? Because not every table is going to be the same. All right, so for simple controls, it's 5. I'm using a keyboard right now. So hit 5 to insert a coin, and then 1 to start, and then shift for your flippers, left shift, right shift, and then space for nudge, and then your left and right nudge keys. Now, keep in mind, this is old Future Pinball physics. This is not a PhysX table, so this is going to play absolutely horrible, okay? Just so that you guys understand that. So if you want to launch the table, you push the enter for the plunger, and you let go, and there you go. So again, remember, this is not normal Future Pinball physics. Sorry, this is not PhysX physics. So this is the bad physics we were talking about. So there you go. So get out of that horrible thing. All right. So when you exit a table, the rule is every single time you close Future Pinball before you want to load another one. You open Future Pinball again and you load a table. Now, if you're using a front end like Pin and Popper, it's going to do all that for you automatically, so you don't have to even think about that. But if you're not using a front end, you need to do this every time. And you should do that with Visual Pinball too, for that matter. That way they are loading fresh. They have no memory leaks or no issues at all. A very good habit to be in. So, yeah. Now, if you're running that in a desktop, in a cabinet view with the back box display running and all that, then the BAM menu is something you can do. In fact, here, actually, I'll show that right now. The BAM menu is something that you can use to make those adjustments. But that's going to be more in the next video, but I'll just bring up the BAM menu really quick so you guys can see. So while the table is playing, you can push tilde or Q, and that brings up the BAM menu, which allows you to change a whole bunch of stuff. But that's not for this video. That's for another video. So we'll get into that later on. But I just wanted to show you that real quick. Okay? And then, well, we're basically at the end now, so play pinball. So we installed Sonic Pinball Mania, right? So let's try a real table very quick. Okay? So before we do that, though, I'm going to show you one more thing, which was actually going way back to, I think it was like up to, where is it? Which step was it? It was right here, yeah. The batch files. So start Future Pinball bat files. So basically what these files do, I made these files up. So that way, the idea is instead of you having to make changes back and forth, like if you wanted to, for example, you had a cabinet set up and you wanted to run a Future Pinball table that doesn't have a DMD, well then you could run this and it will enable all the settings for you automatically and disable the ones you don't want automatically, and then run Future Pinball after that. But what if you want to run a table that does have a DMD and you want to display that on your real DMD on your cabinet? Well then, this one will run Future Pinball with the back box, Future Pinball back box display, and it'll run DMDX, this guy right here, okay? So, what if you don't want that? You want a single screen desktop nothing to do with multi-screen cabinets. Well, then you just run this guy here. Okay. Now, what if you wanted to run a pin event table with a pup pack? And well, you have to disable the back box to make that work so that the pup pack doesn't get covered up. Well, then you run this one here, which will make those changes for you before launching Future Pinball. Or this one, which will also run DMDX if you have a separate DMD display that you also want to use. Okay, so basically all these files are doing is making the changes here. All these changes in here, it just goes through the whole thing and makes the changes within what is set in each of these files, and then runs Future Pinball. So it's basically making it so that you don't have to change anything. So all you got to do is, if you want to learn how each of these are working and what you can or can't change, read this text file here, the README first. It goes through all the info about what it's doing, which ones you should use for what situation, and then it lists all the actual settings that you can change, and you can copy any one of these, like any of these reg add. So this command here, reg add, is going to make a change here. So you can just copy any one of these you want to any of these batch files. A batch file is basically just a text file that runs commands in Windows. And that's all it is, right? So, for example, this one's in VR. All right, so what this will do is, if you look, so these lines that say rem, that's just text. They're not actually executing anything, but all the other lines are. So the reg add, so these are just going to make the changes to Future Pinball. So in this case, it disables the arcade mode and the back box because you don't want those when you're running in VR. In this case, it's disabling vertical sync because for VR, you don't want that unless you can make the frequency of your monitor match the frequency of VR. That's another video. If you want to disable reflections, which I highly recommend for VR, then this is automatically doing that. And then on and on. Other options are here, and then of course all these options are the ones that have to be set correctly for every situation. So it makes sure that these are all set correctly. And then after it does all these, it will then make sure that it changes to the BAM-OpenVR folder, and then it'll start BAM so that we can run BAM for VR tables. And that's basically more or less the idea of what each of these are doing. And then you can add whatever you want, or you can make the changes to whatever you want. So like in this one, for example, if you wanted VSync on for some reason. So the settings are basically, on each of these after /D, the number after that, that's the actual setting, okay? So if you look at all these, you can see they each have like a numerical value after each one. Don't worry about these ones, you can't change them, but these ones, all of them, you can. Okay, like 1 to enable, 0 to disable. Some of them have more than one option, so it's not too hard. Again, you can just read this text file right here, and it lists everything that you can do in here. Okay, even the options that it doesn't change, you can add more, like rotation, changing resolution. Maybe you want to change the resolution while you're running VR. You want VR to run in high def, but when you're running in desktop mode, you want to run it in 4K. So you can add those options into each of these files. You can make a copy of these if you want and run them. Or if you want, you can also create a shortcut to the batch file. Now, these batch files have to stay in here to work. They have to stay in this location, but you can, for example, create a shortcut. So I just created a shortcut for this guy, so I can now name him whatever I want. VR rules or something, you know what I mean? And then when I can paste this or pin it to a different location possibly, or I could paste it to a desktop, but who knows what, and then that way you can do whatever you want with it, and then you can go to the properties, you can make it have it run minimized if you want so you don't see anything. Whatever you want to do is the bottom line. So yeah, so these are extremely handy. because then you can just go back and forth without having to change the files or the settings yourself. So this is very handy for those of you who aren't using a front end. Okay, that's what I really made these for. So that way you guys can just run these without screwing anything up, and then it'll run correctly, is the point. These can also be used with a front end. Popper doesn't need it because Popper can do all this stuff itself right in its own built-in launch script. But say Pinball X or Pinball Y, you could use those with that. And then add extra stuff to these if you want. So that's why they're there. So yeah, so let's just run a table real quick, a real table. So I want to run this in desktop now, okay? So I'm going to run that, and and if you look, you'll see it made the changes needed for everything that was required. So there you go. The only thing it doesn't change is the display number, this guy here. It probably doesn't, no, it does make a change to that. So these are the three main ones. I don't think it changes this one either. But again, you can go in and change that if you want. All right, so I know I was kind of talking about that one for a while, but let's just try running this table really quick. Now, some of the newer tables may take a long time to load because they have thousands and thousands of textures on them. Because, you know, like they're usually slam tilt modded tables that have a lot of videos added to them. And those ones take forever. But most other tables don't take too long. Depending on the speed of your computer, obviously. Sonic the Hedgehog. All right. So now some tables may start off loud. This one is actually not too loud, but see, this is the normal max volume. So you can hear the difference there. So Future Pinball could be pretty loud, so I'll turn this down. So let's just give it a quick try. So nice of you to drop by. And there we go. She's working perfect. All the lighting is correct. Everything's looking fantastic. Now I'm only running this in high def with no anti-aliasing, so I mean it's not going to look, you know, super amazing, but there we go. There you go. And then this table has use for the special button. There you go. And this is a newer table, so it does have physics, so I could do like micro flips, flipper tricks, all that good stuff. And therefore, it's working beautifully. And there you go. And there you go. She's working perfect. So that's basically it. I just wanted to do the essentials for this install guide to get you up and going, and that's exactly what this install guide is all about. Now, if you want to do it with a cabinet setup, again, install the cabinet files and do the settings for cabinet as shown in the pictures, and then you'll be good to go. So that's about it, guys. I don't want to go too much longer on this guide because the other videos will cover all the other extra stuff that, you know, all the different guides I have in here, such as, well, the BAM info guide, which is like the Future Pinball BAM Mega Guide replacement. Then the VR guide, DMDX, which doesn't have too much. The Pin Event one, which is a big one. Popper Baller Installer, that's a big one. And the single screen pup packs, that's a new one that, you know, not many people have known about. And then, of course, the FAQ. So there's lots more to go through for all the extra stuff, guys. But this gets you all the bare essentials up and going nice and easy. And then you have all the guides for you to use at your own leisure. and always to go back to, or all the settings files, everything you need to either do an update or to fix things if they're messed up. It's all there for you guys. So thanks for watching, and watch the follow-up videos, and I hope you enjoy all these great new tables that are coming out. More are coming, guys. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.